we've got about 10 minutes. We're going to do a quick Q&A. Joining me on my right-hand side here is Nathaniel Keith from First Love. Your hair's kind of different. You can take your mask off. Hair's kind of different. And the director of First Love, Beatrice Wu. Let's give them both a big round of applause. Evan Morgan, who directed Kid Detective, is in France. And there he is right there. Give him a big round of applause all the way from France. Evan. Wow, what a thrill. So I'll start off with Beatrice, although Beatrice and Evan, I believe Beatrice, is this your debut short?
Yes.
And Evan, this was your debut feature, right? Which is unbelievable, because that is an amazing piece of work. Same thing to you, Beatrice. Let's, and a lot of casting of children, actually, in both films. Beatrice, I understand the film was your thesis program for Ryerson University Film School there. Talk a bit about how you ended up, what the connection to London is.
Yeah, so for First Love, we knew that we had to cast a lot of children, so we just kind of had open auditions for anybody who is willing to be a part of it. And as soon as Nathaniel walked in for the auditions, like everyone that was in the room immediately just knew that he was perfect for Jacob, who is the lead character in our short.
Very cool. And Nathaniel, you've acted on stages. If you've never seen Nathaniel before, he's been on stages across the region here. Nathaniel, you've been on the stage at the Stratford Festival. What was it like for you doing this film? And talk a bit about the difference in acting in film versus acting on stage.
Well, with stage, you have to rehearse, and it can be from weeks to months, and you have to rehearse to get it perfect, because once you're up on stage and actually performing, that's your only chance. And if something goes wrong, you can't just say cut and do it again. But with film, there's multiple takes, and you can try it again and do it a different way, and then it just can come together and they can pick the perfect take.
Did you need to do a lot of takes?
We did a few, which gave him the opportunity to play around with the character, but honestly, a lot of the takes were very quick. He was perfect for the character. There was not a lot of redos or anything. He was great.
Cool. And Nathaniel, you were, it was a great casting. Good job on the casting, Beatrice, by the way.
Thank you.
One thing that you did as a director that I really loved that struck me right away was it's a short film. You don't have a lot of time, but you had to establish key relationships. And Nathaniel, you were the go-between. You had the world with the guys, that was your vibe there. But then you had that really important relationship with your sister, which was also very important. And you were sort of different characters in both of those. Talk a bit about, as an actor and working with Beatrice as a director, how you did all that, because it was really well done.
Well, I kind of based the relationships that I had with my sister and with my friends, with my actual friends and my actual sister. Because I also have an older sister, and of course I have some friends. But I kind of just based it off that, but also had to base it off how my character was. Because I couldn't act exactly like myself. So yeah, I kind of just had to, I had the same sister love that I had in the film, in real life.
And just as a nod to the City of London, and what we do here, not only in terms of filmmaking, but also acting, how did you start, Nathaniel? Where was the first time you got on stage?
Well, both my parents are actors.
Rod's here,
And Martha.
And Martha, sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out, Rod and Martha.
They're both actors, and they've been doing theater for their entire life almost. And they're doing something for the Fringe Festival, and they decided they wanted to bring me in and just let me try. And I was like 5 years old, I think, when it first happened. And then after that, I loved it, and I just decided I wanted to do more. And I went for auditions for different plays and theater, and then I decided I wanted to go into film, and I got an agent.
Very cool. And congrats for doing the Fringe Festival. I'm a huge fan of the Fringe Festival. I want to move over to Evan. Evan, where in France are you, and what are you doing in France?
I'm right in the center, very close to Vichy. It's a very, very tiny town where I am right now. It's just like 5 minutes outside of Vichy. My partner is French, and we welcomed our first child back in December, and because of the lockdown, we haven't been able to come and introduce him to his French side of the family. So I'm actually living here until mid-November. We've been here for 2 months, and have a few more weeks left.
Oh, cool. Wow, that's, I mean, I'm glad that you're able to be with her side of the family, but that must be sad for your side of the family too, right?
Well, they had the first 8+ months with their grandchild, and they, used to that time. We're good enough to kind of FaceTime with them, so it's going to be, they'll be happy to see us again, but it's all good.
Hey, and what's the connection to the region for a Kid Detective? Southwestern Ontario.
I'm not totally sure. I think that we had some cast and some crew.
That's totally cool. Yeah, I'm not sure either. But every film has a connection to the region. One thing that struck me about the film, and this really struck me, nothing is as it appears. It's a huge journey of self-discovery for multiple people in the cast. But my question to you, Evan, is what did you discover about yourself in writing and making this film?
Interesting. I discovered that, I am extremely high-strung as a filmmaker. Most of my time I spend as a writer and, working from home, and it's a pretty relaxed schedule. And, while we were actually in prep and shooting this movie and, post-production, I just realized how little rest and sleep I actually need. I'd say that was interesting. And how little coffee I actually need when, the circumstances demand my full concentration. And so that was something just kind of not super interesting, but that's something I discovered. In the process of writing the script, I'm not sure. It was a very personal story. It was very informed by just, experience that I had as kind of a precocious kid who knew he wanted to be a filmmaker at a very young age, and was really heartily encouraged by everyone around me. And then at a certain point, that confidence that others have in you becomes a kind of burden that you're beholden to. It becomes, a projected identity that you then have to achieve, rather than something that happens organically. And I wanted to make a movie that was about that idea, using this character obviously as a very kind of symbolic version of a child star and someone who's peaked super early, and assuming that people will relate to it in their own unique way. And so as far as what I learned writing the script, I don't know, the whole thing was so informed by my experience that I suppose it was cathartic on some level.
Oh, that's a beautiful answer. And I'm seeing lots of depth there, just so you know. Beatrice, your fellow director, was nodding her head, sort of in agreement with you. Too bad you can't be here to see that. Wow, that's so I love that it was a cathartic experience for you, and congrats for going deep. That's what it felt to me. Often, sometimes the first time.
Very much so. Yeah. Well, in so many ways, that character solving his first big case was me making my first feature-length film.
I love that. I love that. His first case, your first feature film, and discovering how you were on the set. Just to stay away from the personal stuff, one of the challenges for indie filmmakers is getting a lead, a star, so then you can get some money and hope then you can get some, distribution. You need to star. How did you get Adam Brody? Big actor, Los Angeles. How did you get Adam Brody?
I actually met Adam about 10 years ago at TIFF. I had a short that was screening at the time, and I shared some of my work with him. I was a really big fan of his. I always wanted to work with him ever since I saw him on DOC. I was just a huge fan of his particular comic energy. And I was just excited about doing something different with his instinct and with his charisma, something different from what we'd seen. And so when I originally met him, I was just very motivated to try and find something to do together. And I ended up getting preoccupied with a different project. Met him again at Sundance 2 years later, and that's when I pitched him on this particular idea. And we started talking about it back in 2013, and I was sharing the script with him as I wrote. It was all written for him specifically, and then after about a year, when we had something that we felt good about, we just started the process of trying to get it financed, and that took a very, very long time.
Well, of course, raising, because we're talking, I'm assuming, millions of dollars, right, to finance it.
Sure, yeah, not too many millions, but the scale of the project is such that it required a certain amount of money in order to do it properly, and then not really just cut massive sections out of the script. And thankfully, we arrived at a budget that was extremely challenging, but not so challenging that I had to make those kinds of sacrifices. It was it worked out extraordinarily well. And the other thing about having a smaller budget is it just means that people invest in a different way. You know, they're stretching every dollar as far as they can, and when you have a young team, it's a great motivator in terms of, you know, people want to show what they're capable of with you know, a limited amount of resources.
100%. Sometimes having boundaries and limitations makes you strive even harder. I do want to just point out the fact that Evan mentioned that it was at a film festival, not this one, but TIFF, where he got to work, where he got to present a short film and met someone in a feature film. And those kinds of relationships and serendipitous moments are what we're so proud of here at the Forest City Film Festival, because we're encouraging those kinds of encounters as well. So, Beatrice, while you're around, say hi to her. You never know who you're going to meet. We have a couple of minutes, like real short, for questions. Any questions from the audience at all? Any questions at all from the audience? Evan, you can't see them, I don't think, but it's a pretty, there are no questions at all, you guys? I do have one question. The film has this obviously interesting and very well directed turn from, I mean, I don't want to use the term light at the beginning because there's a bit of shade, but then it gets quite dark. So talk about your challenge making that turn from something that starts out light with just a hint of darkness, but then gets really deep and serious.
Well, before I started working on Kid Detective, I'd written and produced and edited another film called The Dirties, which kind of has a similar arc, where it starts as something that's very laugh-laden and very, you know, comic in terms of its energy, and it gradually shifts into a dark and ominous place, and ultimately ends in a sequence of, you know, surprising and graphic violence. So the structure of Kid Detective was emboldened by what we'd already done with that previous movie, and it just seemed, the moment I had the idea, it seemed like it was a premise that was immediately comic in terms of imagining a former, you know, child detective and Encyclopedia Brown kind of personality as someone who is washed up in their 30s and struggling with, you know, expectation. But at the same time, it also seemed immediately tragic and immediately sad. And I wanted to honor, you know, and explore both of those potentials rather than opt for one and sacrifice the other. And I also understood that this character's journey wouldn't really feel like it was complete unless there was some kind of coming of age story. And how do you tell a coming of age story for someone who's already an adult? For me, it was, he has to confront something that is just so dark, so beyond the horizon of his own perception that, like, it shocks him out of his selfishness and just completely, you know, changes him in a fundamental way. And so already before I even knew what mystery I was writing, I knew that it was going to have that kind of descent. And as far as, you know, that transition and making it work, relies partly on performance and making sure that, you know, while we're trying to land jokes, tell jokes, and pay them off, the performances have to be grounded enough that the characters retain a sense of authenticity and the world retains a sense of, you know, gravity in terms of the stakes. You know, if someone dies in this universe, they're really dead, and there are parents who mourn them. You know, and so that was kind of the logic that I took into it, where we'll be telling you, you know, joke, 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 and then take a moment to remind you that the stakes are real, that a girl was kidnapped, you know, a real girl, and, you know, her parents suffered, and her father killed himself, and then, you know, back in the present day, another child has been murdered, and he has parents too, and, you know, it really just every 20 minutes or so reminding you in a moment that there is, you know, an authenticity to this universe, and the stakes are real, and so that by the time we arrive, you know, where we're headed, it doesn't feel like the film has betrayed itself, you know, in any significant way. It feels like it could only have ended up in that place.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations for digging deep into your own soul and the cathartic experience and bringing it to the page so beautifully. Beatrice, Evan, Nathaniel, thank you very much for joining us all the way from France. Thanks. Let's have a big hand for our technical crew also making that happen. Yeah. Just a quick reminder, when you leave, you're going to receive an email, and it's going to invite you to vote for the Old Oak Audience Choice Awards. If you haven't seen it, check your spam folder. It really makes a difference to the filmmakers. Thank you all so much for coming out. Tell your friends. We've got a whole other day tomorrow, tonight, films too. Thank you all very much, and thank you guys for coming. Thank you all very much.
Mm.